We went again in 97 when it was dry, and then once we got into the 2000s, it was pretty much every year. We have had since the early 2000s, we probably have had a couple of years where we haven't had sheep in containment areas in the autumn, but yeah, pretty much nearly every year. So, and the reason we put them in is to protect the pastures. You spend a lot of money sowing pastures, and or used to sow a lot of pastures when we had a winter dominant rainfall and phalaris was persisting and stuff. But now with climate change, and we no longer have I wouldn't call it a winter dominant rainfall anymore. I'm still trying to work out what pasture we should sow because we're struggling to keep phalaris in the system. We can keep some of it in, but it's getting harder and harder. And the newer varieties like Holdfast GT, fantastic production, but the jury's still out on how long it'll persist. We've got a paddock across the road here, across the main road, where it was fantastic for about 3 years, and now it's back to being very, very sparse, and that's in the space of probably 6-7 years ago we sowed that. So you can't afford to be sowing pastures, perennial pastures that only last 6 or 7 years. So we haven't actually sowed any perennial pasture here for about 4 years, and yeah, still trying to work out what the hell we do, where we change. So just as a quick glimpse of what climate change is actually doing here, I decided last winter I'd better have a look and work it out. So you can get the rainfall data from the Bureau of Meteorology for any 5 kilometre by 5 kilometre grid across Australia, and so I downloaded that data, had 143 years of data, and then I looked at what would cause a failed spring, because that's what really buggers us in this area is the failed spring. You can sort of cope with dry autumns and everything else, but if you have a failed spring, you're in trouble. So a failed spring I defined as being less than 150 mils of rain in August, September, October. And so out of the 143 years, 7% of years have failed springs. However, when you look at the failed springs since 2000, 42% of the years since 2000 have been failed springs. And last spring wasn't a failed one. It missed out by, I can't quite remember whether it was 16 mils or 22 mils or something. We went over 150 mils. So last year wasn't a failed spring. It may as well have been. So I was talking to Sandy McEachran the other day, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, he just laughed, and he said, yeah, but he said, you're counting all those years in the millennial drought. And I just said, well, does that mean was all the last 24 years, is that an aberration or is that the new normal? Anyway, he was very quiet. He didn't have an opinion on that. So, and I don't know the answer to that. It may well be somewhere in between. You can handle 7% failed springs. You can handle 10%, 15%. You can probably handle 20%. But when you get to 42%, can't handle it. So if this continues the way it is, then our production system as we've known it is completely unsustainable. And the only way we can solve that is to treat it the same way that they do in lower rainfall countries further west of here, and that means lowering the stocking rate. Now, lowering stocking rates has never been something I've been that enthusiastic about because the stocking rate is it is the major driver of profit. So, and if you're going to repay your debt, well, you've got to have a higher stocking rate. So I'm still coming to grips with that, and the only thing that's I guess is going in my favour is that I'm just about at the end of my farming career, and somebody else is going to have to worry about it. So all you younger people, you're going to have to find the solutions or worry about it, because I may not be retired, but I'm going to be worrying about it less in the next 10 years than I have in the last 10. So. Yeah, so that's just a bit of an overview. So the pastures, we like this paddock in here. It's been locked up. We like to get stock off some paddocks, or we like to get them all off before they all get really bare. And so we've got a few paddocks that are one over there on that hill. It's a bit bare around the top, and the top of that camp up there is bare. But we try to keep some ground cover, because if you don't, when it does rain, it just washes everywhere. And somebody a couple of days ago was telling us about how it was somebody who knew nothing about agriculture, and they'd gone past this hill, and they wondered what had made the ice cream shapes, melted ice cream shapes, off the top of the hill. That was their description of what had happened. So, and in past years, before we started containment feeding, we used to have a whole pile of country that was way too bare, and you lose too much nutrient off it. And, when you can see those creeks running black at the end of the autumn when it does rain, you've gone too far. So it's too expensive to lose any of that top 10 mil of soil off the top. So I know sometimes you don't, you can't get them off in time, and we've got paddocks like that as well. When you do get that autumn rain, if you've got a little bit of ground cover, you don't need much. I mean, that paddock out there will go like crazy with the rain on it, because it's not too there. And this one over here's got a bit of green in it from when the last bit of rain we had. The one up there with a green sheep camp, we get a bit of rain on that. Well, at least you can let these out. You can let them out pretty quickly onto those sort of paddocks, maybe 10 days or something.
Grant, I just ask, when you're measuring your your ground cover, what parameters are you using? How do you go about saying, okay, this is the point I've got to take the sheep out?
Well,
do you use a square quadrant, or is it?
Well, the rule of thumb's always been 70% ground cover, but you don't, like 70% ground cover, you've still got a fair bit of feed in the paddock. It's surprising if you start measuring it, what 70% ground cover is. It's certainly more than that. That bit just there. So how do I do it? It's a bit like pasture assessment. Jim Vagona said to me some time ago, how do you judge these things? And I said, I think it's just that I've been around long enough now that I know, and which is no use to the rest of you, because that's not helpful. So I think the 70% ground cover is the way to go. And if you want to get a quadrat out, of something, and just throw it in the paddock and have a look, that's a good way to do it. But after a while, you sort of learn what you can take it down to. So
because it could be very variable across a paddock.
Yeah.
Like you say, you've got an area here, but then you go here, where in front of Alison, you're probably back there to 50%.
Yeah. So if you take that hill up there with a big sheep camp on it, then at the top of that, it's probably going to have about 5% ground cover on it. But at the bottom of the paddock, where there's some phalaris, some dry phalaris, it could still have this much dry phalaris on it. So you don't get that with cattle, but you certainly do with high stocking rate on sheep. So it can be very variable around the paddock. So if you've got a bit of ground cover on the bottom, then it doesn't matter so much if the top of the hill gets bare, as long as when you do get 50, 60 mil of rain in over a few hours, that what runs off the top of the hill doesn't get into a creek. So that's what you've got to try and stop. Keep that stuff on your own farm. So it's no good allowing them down at Wagga or hay or something to pick up all your super and all your other nutrients, nitrogen, whatever might go with it. So we sort of try and make a decision early. My experience is you're much better off to make a decision to feed earlier than later, and get your stock up onto a full grain ration as quick as you can. And then if you do get showers of rain, like this year was the classic, we had, I forgot how much rain we had, but a couple of times where we've had a bit of green feed, and so then, we'll either we've got all the stock on a full grain ration. We'll only feed them once a week, so that gives them 50% of their ration, and that might go on for 2 weeks or something while they've got a bit of green pick in the paddock, and then you can build it up again quickly. But it's always really difficult if you only get them up a little bit and you think, oh well, I won't give that mob so much and they're on a different rate. Forget it. Just get every sheep on the place up to a full ration as quick as you can, and then you can drop mobs off and only feed them, once a week rather than twice, or cut their rate back. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to muck around with varying amounts for varying mobs. Well, that's what I find. It might cost you a little bit more just to get them all up onto that ration, but it's way more flexible in the long run.
So, Grant, so is that like trail feeding out in the paddock?
Yeah, so we start
a confined area.
Yeah, we start them all in the paddock, and we've got a spreadsheet that just work out just increasing amounts every day, feed them every day. If anybody wants that, how we get them up, I can send that to you. Or give it to you later. And so we get them all onto full ration in the paddock, and if we can see any shy feeders in the paddock, we try and get them off in the paddock. Shy feeders used to be a really big thing when we first started this feeding, but I don't know what happens to them now. Whether they just get used to eating it, but we often don't have any shy feeders in the paddock anymore. Or maybe it was back in the 1990s and early 2000s, we had to feed a lot of wheat rather than barley, and that could be the reason too. So we haven't fed wheat here for, I think we might have fed some. I don't think we even fed wheat in 2007, but 2007 or 8, I'd say it was probably 2003 is the last time we fed wheat. So.
Grant, that shy feed, is that potentially part of the fact that you're doing things differently? You know exactly what you're doing now. You're getting out on the front foot early, so it's not the main part of the ration, etc., etc. So you're getting out, and they get a bit more used to it.
Well, the other thing is that if you try and rush them on, then you'll end up with more shy feeders. You'll blow more up. So whenever we employ somebody into some sort of management role or who's had a bit of experience, one of the questions we ask them is, have you ever fed sheep? And they say yes. And I say, well, how many have you killed? And if they say no, I know they're lying, right? Because anybody who's ever fed sheep's killed and blown some up. So things go wrong, and it does happen. You don't want it to happen, but it does. But the earlier you start and the slower you go getting them up onto that full ration, the less problems you'll have. And every time we've tried to push the limit and get them into the containment areas early, you always end up with a problem. But if you start early enough, so it takes us like a month is the absolute quickest you can get them into here. And if you take 6, 7, 8 weeks, that's much better. 6 weeks is pretty common for us to get them in. So starting early is the So if there are any shy feeders, we take them off and in the paddock, drift them off. Somebody feeds and somebody goes around with the buggy or the motorbike and just cuts them off, preferably without a dog. Dogs always want to bring them back onto the mob. So, and so yeah, get rid of them out of the system. And then when you get them in the drought lot, you'll also have some that are pretty skinny. I don't know. There'll probably be some in here that although these were sorted up last week, and we either run them through the draft to take out the light ones, or what's a much better idea is run them from here up to the main road, just let them out in the laneway, and you just cut the stragglers off the back. And that, because run them through the draft, the ones that are not doing well, that might have good, they might still be in reasonable condition, but they're not, for some reason they're not well, not really well, then you can cut them off really easily in the laneway, and that becomes a good way to get them. So we've always got a mob of them, and if you've got a paddock where they can go to, that's good. So where's our paddock with?
Green one. Some are in the green and some are
Yeah, so that.
but they're all good over there, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So
The latest ones are in the green one.
yep. Right. So for those who don't know, this is Tim, and that's my son-in-law, Megan's husband. Yeah, so the ones that we took off first up, there's a couple of hundred of them now, and they're across the road. Well, they look pretty good now. They could nearly go back in the drought lot. We won't do that because I've done that before, and they're probably like people, don't like living in the city. So they don't do as well. So leave them out. And then you've nearly always got some paddock with a bit of feed in it. You can push them up into the hills or whatever. But if there are some skinny ones in, and we're running them through the draft for any reason, like last week we took the rams out, or maybe it was the week before, good opportunity to take all the light ones off as well. So you can get rid of all the skinny ones, treat them separately. So when we put them in, so first up when we put sheep in, we were feeding them, back in the 1990s, barley barley was really only grown for producing beer, and it wasn't really a stock feed. And so you could buy Triticale then, which I don't know if anybody grows Triticale now, but Triticale was better than wheat, it was safer. So in order of safety, you go oats, barley, Triticale, wheat. And so, but we had to feed wheat, and we were just feeding straight wheat, no roughage, nothing else. And nearly every week we'd have to get them in and take the light ones off because it was just too hard on their systems. And then we started introducing roughage, and that really did make a difference. As soon as you start introducing roughage, they're bloody ruminants. They've got to ruminate, so they need something to ruminate on. So a bit of roughage is what they get. So these are eating roughly a kilo of barley straw a week. That's about what they consume. And I make them eat it right down. So I brought an extra bale for these here this morning, but they'll do another 2 or 3 days here before they clean that up. I want them to eat it all because getting barley tailings now is becoming really difficult to get. I can get wheat straw. Wheat straw is not as good. So in terms of straws, barley straw is the best. It's got better digestibility. Wheat straw is the next best. It's not as digestible, but it's okay. And then the one that you want to avoid, but if you have to, is rice straw. Rice straw it's god awful stuff. I remember when we first used some rice straw, and you put it in the pen, and they'd race up to it, and then they'd walk away. It's just it's just dreadful stuff.
Doesn't make them happy again.
Yeah, it does make them happier. Yeah, if you've got to feed it, I don't know. It's hard to imagine we'll get into rice straw this year, but you should never say that. You never know what's around the corner. So feeding roughage is really good. So what else do we feed? We're over in that little little cubby house thing over there. That's got lime, salt, and coarse mag in it. So we're using a mixture of that. We don't usually start off with that. You can go 6 or 8 weeks or probably more before we start introducing that. But these weathers probably don't need it. It's debatable. Leah might make a comment on that.
Do you think they do better with it, or do these
Yeah,
dry
they
sheep?
do. Certainly the ewes do.
Yeah, but they're dry sheep.
Well, they probably do. Yeah. Certainly the ewes have got to have the calcium.
Yeah.
So it's and the mix we mix 2 parts salt, 2 parts lime, and 1 part coarse mag. That's the mix we use. I don't know. They eat it. They eat it surprisingly quickly. I have been wondering why I should cut the salt back a little bit, just so they don't eat so much of it. Yeah, I'm thinking about the cost, so, as always.
You could probably get rid of the coarse mag.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the coarse mag may not be. The
The coarse mag is providing.
magnesium, yeah. So they certainly need the calcium. So how much do we feed? The first thing is you should know what the feed test result is on your grain. So you've just seen a truck come in, he's unloading now. Now I can take a feed test from that, and I can take it into Wagga, and I can get him to do a test, but there'll be none of that grain left by the time I get the result, right? I assume it's all the same. I haven't. The best thing is if you've got a feed test, download what's it called? GrassFeed. Download the app GrassFeed. Put your the details of your grains in and the roughage that you're feeding, and that'll tell you exactly how much to feed them based on their live weight, what time of the year it is. It's fantastic. I used to run GrassFeed. I would be running it every week when I started doing this in the 1990s and into the 2000s. But I haven't run GrassFeed for several years now, and once again, it just as you get more experience, you just know what's got to happen. So, but the GrassFeed's definitely the.
Grant, there is actually a easier version of that available now, because GrassFeed's fantastic, but it's more of an online, like using your computer model with that. But with your phone, as everybody wants to do these days, with your apps, there's the Drought feed calculator, and there's the Drought feed or Drought supplementary feed calculator, which are 2 great resourceful tools to have on your phone. That'll do exactly the same thing. You just put your class of stock in, age, whether they're pregnant, dry, whatever it's going to be, litres, mature sheep. You put your bits and pieces in, and if you actually if they're in a paddock situation like you start off with, and you're saying, well, I've still got 800 or I've got 1200 kgs dry matter available to you, you plug all that in as well, and it'll say, okay, well, they're getting X amount out of that. You need to feed them 400 grams a day of barley. That's the way it will just help with that program.
So usually by the time you've the apps are really good, as Martin Martin says on paddock feeding. They're brilliant for that because they can.
It helps you to adjust that phase before sort of coming into the lot, and then there's the one you can use, which is called the Drought Feed Calculator app. That just for in a drought situation.
How much you can feed them. So basically we feed them 3 kilos or we were when we start them and the weather's dry stock, we're still on 3 kilos of barley a week. The frame size on these sheep, I used to say they were 48 kilos, but it's snuck up over the last few years as we've tried to put on more production in the wool production. Like everybody else, we've got caught out and you know, we're probably around about 50, maybe 51 now or something. So we're still feeding them 3 kilos a week until about when I did the last feed sheet, which was probably a fortnight ago, and the ewes I bumped up 10%, so they're now on 3.3 kilos. The rams are only taken out, so you know we've still got another couple of months before we have to worry too much about what the effects of pregnancy on them. So for the next month or two, pregnancy is not really going to be an issue with them. So that's what we're feeding them. The salt, coarse mag, and the straw, and that's it. Now we do down the back here. We've got a couple of hectare paddock along the creek, which has got a lot of Phragmites that you know, it grows in wet areas, and so we usually lock it up, and it becomes a bit of a roughage source as well. So we do tend to let them out, you know, give them a rotation just to change the scenery, and they can pick up a bit of roughage from the Phragmites. There's not much green left in it now. Any green that is there is going to be really low quality, low digestibility, and we will let them out if we get a shower of rain and everything greens up a bit. We'll often let them out just to be able to get just a little bit of green feed. Libby Salmon, who used to work for CSIRO Plant Industries, said to me back in the 1990s, she said, you know, Grant, a little bit of green goes a very, very long way in the summer, and it's so true. You know, it just adds all those other things that grain and straw don't have. So yeah, we basically we don't let them out. These sheep have been in drought lots since February, and yeah, they're reasonably happy. They're in reasonably good condition. We don't want them too fat. Last thing you want fat sheep when you're joining. Otherwise you end up with too many multiples, too many twins, and nobody needs twins. Fertility is not a driver of profit in a merino enterprise. Anything over 70% is a bonus. So, the amount of trough space that you need is surprisingly little. So you only need about, on a single-sided trough, you only need about 5 centimetres per sheep. So you don't need much. So the number of sheep that you can put in a pen should be dictated by the length of trough you've got. So 50 metres of trough space, or 100 metres of trough space. Sorry, what did I say? 5 centimetres. 2 centimetres is all you need. Yeah. So it's not much.
2.5.
So for 100 metres of trough space, you can have 1,000 sheep. We have had over 1,000 sheep in this pen here before. I don't like them that big. So this is about 50 metres here, and I think there's 770 in that there. So yeah, so you don't need much trough space when you've got a lot of sheep in there and they've only got 2 centimetres of trough space. When you first put them in, they'll just about kill themselves trying to get at the feed, and you've got to make sure you've got to either you walk up and down or you get a dog to run up and down here to keep scaring them back off the thing, and then eventually they settle down, and then after a while, when they've been in for a long time, you'll find that the shy feeders will stay back and they'll wait until everybody's had a feed. So at a kilo and a half per sheep per feed, there's the gutses all come in and get their feed, and the shy feeders stay back, but they can't eat. The sheep can't eat a kilo and a half in one sitting. So they'll get a fill and then they'll move back, and then the shy feeders can come in. Things over the years. First one was just fed them on the ground, and feeding them on the ground is fine. We could feed sheep on the ground here because it's not too powdery. Over in there, it's starting to get too much shit and stuff, and it's fine until it rains. You can feed sheep on the ground until it rains, and then you tend to end up with problems. We ended up with picking up salmonella once in a drought lot, and that was because we had wet grain. Some of them were fed on the ground, some in the troughs, but it was wet grain and it wasn't wonderful. So, and down in these other pens, there's way too much shit. We've been using these. That drought lot was built in 2002, so there's been a lot of sheep in there, and it's just too deep. You can't, once you gets really powdery and shitty, you need to feed them outside. So the next system we used was we had conveyor belt, and we had it under we put the conveyor belt down, started off with a few logs under each side just to make a trough, and then we built the fence over the top, knocked the steel posts through the trough, and that worked pretty well, except that they'd shit in the trough on that side, so you're always having to clean out the blowers weren't invented then, and you'd have to broom out the trough every day, so that wasn't much fun. So then we moved the conveyor belt out the side, and we had it with short steel posts and a wire out there. But the thing was, we found that you'd end up with your conveyor belt out here, and the sheep really, they couldn't get to it. There'd be a little strip right out on the edge of the conveyor that they couldn't get to. So we got rid of that idea, and we got these made up, and we've been using these troughs ever since. So the number of sheep that you can put in a pen should be dictated by the length of trough you've got. So 50 metres of trough space, 100 metres of trough space, 2 centimetres is all you need. So it's not much. So for 100 metres of trough space, you can have 1,000 sheep. We have had over 1,000 sheep in this pen here before. I don't like them that big. So this is about 50 metres here, and I think there's 770 in that there. You don't need much trough space when you've got a lot of sheep in there, and they've only got 2 centimetres of trough space. When you first put them in, they'll just about kill themselves trying to get at the feed, and you've got to make sure you've got to either you walk up and down, or you get a dog to run up and down here to keep scaring them back off the thing, and then eventually they settle down, and then after a while, when they've been in for a long time, you'll find that the shy feeders will stay back, and they'll wait until everybody's had a feed. So at a kilo and a half per sheep per feed, there's the gutses all come in and get their feed, and the shy feeders stay back, but they can't eat. The sheep can't eat a kilo and a half in one sitting. So they'll get a fill, and then they'll move back, and then the shy feeders can come in. So if you were to feed them more often than twice a week, then you're going to have you're going to run into problems, because the gutses will eat more. So I have seen or was reading where somewhere some work that was done back in the 1940s or 1950s or something, they were suggesting that one feed a week was better than two even. But these troughs will only hold 1.5 kilos per sheep. So water, yep. So there's one little trough over there, just in line with the hay shed with the sheep around it now. It's only a little 8-foot trough. You don't need a big trough, but you do need a good replenishment rate. So replenishment rate's the key. It's not the size of the trough. They've got 24 hours a day to get a drink, so there's plenty of time for 1,000 sheep to get a drink there during the day. So need a good replenishment rate. So we've got they're now watering off a dam up there. We have got 2 dams, and the top dam we haven't hooked up because we haven't had time to do it. It's probably pretty well. Annette came here on yesterday and discovered that there's a trough down there that the bloody wombats dug a hole under, or had dug a hole under, and trough had collapsed a bit more, and the water was leaking out, and we didn't have a look on Sunday at the Drought lot, and so I don't know how much water got lost. So if a 2 dam system's actually pretty good for that. So you can only lose it out of the 1 dam. So whereas if you had it out of your major water source, you could lose the whole lot. So, but yeah, it's 2-inch pipe down there, and it's only 1 inch. They're only 1-inch risers, so they're only small valves. Tends to work pretty well. Water, yep. So there's one little trough over there, just in line with the hay shed with the sheep around it now. It's only a little 8-foot trough. You don't need a big trough, but you do need a good replenishment rate. So replenishment rate's the key. It's not the size of the trough. They've got 24 hours a day to get a drink, so there's plenty of time for 1,000 sheep to get a drink there during the day. So need a good replenishment rate. So we've got they're now watering off a dam up there. We have got 2 dams, and the top dam we haven't hooked up because we haven't had time to do it. It's probably pretty well. Annette came here on yesterday and discovered that there's a trough down there that the bloody wombats dug a hole under, or had dug a hole under, and trough had collapsed a bit more, and the water was leaking out, and we didn't have a look on Sunday at the Drought lot, and so I don't know how much water got lost. So if a 2 dam system's actually pretty good for that. So you can only lose it out of the 1 dam. So whereas if you had it out of your major water source, you could lose the whole lot. So, but yeah, it's 2-inch pipe down there, and it's only 1 inch. They're only 1-inch risers, so they're only small valves. Tends to work pretty well. So the water's just out of a dam. Some of the other drought lots we've got wells with solar pumps on them that pump up to tanks. But I'm a great believer in gravity, or simple things. Pencil and paper are fantastic, and so is gravity. Rarely fails. So that's why we've got the feed truck set up like this, which we'll give a demo now if I can get a driver. What's happened today is we've got 2 of these trucks, and if you're feeding a heap of sheep, you need a backup of how you're going to feed them if something breaks down. To feed large numbers of stock, the truck works really well. It's way safer than a Land Cruiser and a feed cart. Like we can put 8 tonne in that and head off, so you can feed a lot of sheep. And safety wise, yeah, you can't beat a truck. You can buy one of these second hand. You can buy one of these for about the same price as a Land Cruiser. So unfortunately you're not seeing these sheep race in like they normally did, because Annette was too soft yesterday and she fed them. So we try and keep our lambs out. So in '94 when we started, we put lambs in, and we fed the lambs in the drought lot. But ever since then, whenever we can keep lambs out, we'll try and keep some roughage in the paddock, and also maiden ewes. If you can keep them out, they do better. But if you've got to put them in, it just means you're probably going to have to feed them some maybe some better quality hay as well as the straw. So we're considering whether we shouldn't yard wean lambs as well, because when we're weaning here the first week in November, we've usually got green feed, but the last few years there's been so much summer rain that we've got so much problem with Barber's poleworm. Like it's a massive problem here now. We're drenching all the time. Another beauty of having them locked up in here, if they're locked up in here, they're not picking up Barber's poleworm, which is a real advantage. Basically, we're drenching them in. The vaccination, we're not too fussed about because they have a pretty good vaccination history anyway. They're all vaccinated every year, so you could argue that we should be giving them one more booster. The deaths that we do have are usually by misadventure, not from disease. The only disease outbreak we've had was one round of salmonella, and that was when we weren't feeding roughage. But salmonella's only going to be an issue if you've got wet feed, wet yards, something like that. They pick it up, and they get that from the birds. So birds transmit it. Issues with dust? Oh well, it gets in the water troughs, so you've got to clean them out every day. So we haven't talked about stocking density. So we've had everything from 1,000 to 10,000 sheep per hectare, and the reason we went to 10,000 was somebody said, oh, if you go to 10,000, then you never have any dust, and that's right, because the urine is settling the dust all the time. So you go to 10,000. However, at 10,000, it's like all those people living in the sky rises in Hong Kong. You know, they need to escape occasionally. It's too much. Somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000's not bad. As I said previously, it'll be dictated by the length of your trough, and then you can. So building drought lots. How should you build them? This one's it's just a paddock that was already there. We should take 5 minutes and just go and have a look at these others, because the others have got features which are probably easier to look at rather than talk about. I think the most important thing is that you have it next to your yards. Otherwise they become useless all the rest of the time. So get it as close to your yards as you possibly can, and then, you know, if you're dipping sheep or doing something, you can fill these up the day before. They've got access. So there's actually 4 pens here, not 2. We've only got 2 mobs running here, and they've got a lot of access. But yeah, put it next to your yards if you can. This is probably one of the better sites. It's got a little bit of slope away from it, so the water can run away. It's reasonably flat, so it's easy to drive the truck down either side. We've got gates at the ends, and this one hasn't got one at the back, but that one's got one at the back on that corner, and another one at the back on that corner. So if you've got crook sheep that aren't coming onto the trough, you can feed them, and if they're hanging back, you know, you can get some sheep off if you need to. That's important. You need somewhere where have your trough somewhere. If you're on a slope, the trough's better off to be on the bottom end of the slope, so that if you do get an overflow, it's not wetting it. Or if we feed straw down in that other pen, and then when you clean the trough out, that the water runs in on the straw. So or in that other pen, we feed them on the high points so that if and when it does rain, you know, your straw's not in the wet bit. So just little things like that. So it's really your trough length that defines how many sheep you can put in a pen, but you want your trough along the long side if you can get it. And yeah, we've made these about 20 metres. I have been going to go back and extend this over here, but we've actually got a little paddock on the creek over there, which it's called the lucerne paddock, but it's impossible to grow lucerne in, because in the 1850s or 70s or something, all the Chinese gold miners dug it all up and sluiced it all, so there's no topsoil. It was all just sand. So we've had a stack of sheep in over there, and the other day it's about 2 hectares, the paddock, and we were, until we split the wethers up, we were putting about 8 tonne of organic matter in there every week. So that's 4 tonne of organic matter per hectare per week. So we're going to generate some topsoil there. So not sure we'll still be able to grow lucerne there, but it's actually quite useful to put it where you need it. Whereas here, all this just keeps building up, and I suppose it washes out into the paddock there and gives a bit of advantage to the Phalaris in the paddock. These are little short ones. They came from David Sackett's place when they sold it at Barambler, and they're low. He used to drive a feed cart over the top. He had those in the centre of the pen and used to drive over the top and feed in that way. So they're only half as high as the others. But yeah, we've had a bit of rust in some of them, but these have been here since 2002. You get the gal ones, you haven't got a problem. So they're bent up so that one end is slightly wider at the top than the other end, and that way they fit in and you can tack screw them together. Yeah, I think design-wise, that's probably about it. You just make use of the facilities you've got, because if you want to get these to take the light ones off, well, it's not hard to run them around the draft, and if it's right next to the yard. So.